He has dedicated his life to service. He served in the Air Force and then Army, deploying to Kuwait and Iraq, where he earned a Bronze Star. After his honorable discharge, Tim's call to public service brought him to HUD, where he's helped victims of domestic abuse in Louisville find safety, helped veterans get off the streets, and helped first-time home buyers achieve their American dream. But a few weeks ago, Tim was fired. No notice, no severance, no compassion. As we speak, the Trump administration is carrying out the biggest layoff of veterans in history, including tens of thousands announced just last night. That's why today I am co-sponsoring the Protect Veteran Jobs Act to reinstate veterans who have been illegally fired by Elon Musk and Doge. Veterans put on the uniform. They served something higher than themselves. They deserve better. Tim, thank you for all of your service. I won't stop fighting for veterans like you. I yield back.
For what purposes, gentleman from Wisconsin, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize a Green Bay local legend, Bill Jartz, who is retiring from WBAY after more than 4 decades, including 27 years at the evening anchor desk. Bill grew up right in Wisconsin's 8th Congressional District in Clintonville and started his career with WBAY as a sports reporter in 1983. He made the jump to evening news in 1998. Bill's legacy extends far beyond the newsroom. It lives in his warmth, wit, and unwavering dedication to our community. In fact, Bill is known for not being able to say no to any charitable cause where he can make a difference. He's been a familiar voice, emceeing, speaking, or judging countless local fundraisers and events for charitable organizations, including the CP Telethon and Make-A-Wish's Gourmet Wishes. Throughout his career, it is estimated that he dedicated more than 5,000 hours of community service. While all of us in Northeast Wisconsin will miss Bill's news coverage, thankfully, we will still get to hear the voice of Lambeau during Green Bay Packer home games. Thank you, Bill, for your many years of service to Northeast Wisconsin, and congratulations on your retirement. May this next chapter be as fulfilling as the legacy you leave behind. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purposes, the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Jennifer and Stephanie Hahn, 2 remarkably accomplished sisters from El Paso, whose dedication and success in women's boxing has inspired all of us. Jennifer Hahn, former IBF World Featherweight Champion and soon-to-be member of the International Women's Boxing Hall of Fame, has paved the way for women in the sport, making her one of the most accomplished female boxers in the country and the world. She now lives a quiet life as a mother and trainer at a local gym where she teaches youth programs. Her sister, Stephanie Hahn, has built her own legacy in boxing with an undefeated record. She earned this year's WBA lightweight title by way of knockout in the first round in under 2 minutes. She is ranked as number 2 in the world, and beyond her success in the sport, she's a dedicated mother, wife, and officer with the El Paso Police Department, where she dedicates herself to public service. We are so proud of both of them. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The cost of illegal immigration to this country and to my home state of California, according to a 2023 report, the benefits and services provided to the estimated 3.23 million illegal aliens just in California cost local taxpayers just under $23 billion annually. Factoring in about 1.15 million U.S.-born children of illegal aliens, sometimes known as anchor babies, this adds more than $8 billion in costs, to making it roughly $31 billion in total. So this total cost under these findings of $31 billion works out to a per capita cost to Californians of $7,074 annually. This report pegs the combined federal, state, and local costs nationwide associated with illegal immigration at $182 billion annually, and that's probably a low number. State and local taxes paid by Californians account for 1/6 just in my home state, of the nationwide costs associated with illegal immigration, including in K through 12 education, housing and nutrition assistance, in-state tuition at public colleges and universities, health coverage under the state's Medi-Cal program, which is in trouble, sweeping sanctuary policies which make our cities less safe. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I speak unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in recognition of the outstanding leadership of Sheriff Randy Redder, who dedicated 37 years of law enforcement experience to my district in Wayne County. Over that career, Sheriff Redder has worked tirelessly, holding positions of ever-increasing responsibility, beginning as a road patrol officer before being ultimately elected sheriff of Wayne County and having served as president of the Indiana Sheriff's Association. It was as sheriff that Mr. Redder met with the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service to diligently detain illegal criminal migrants, making the 6th District far safer for Hoosiers to live and work in. And it was this past Tuesday in a joint session I had the privilege of hosting Sheriff Redder as my guest for the President's joint address to Congress. Our first, we shared that experience together. It was there that the President reaffirmed his steadfast support for our nation's law enforcement officers and their vital work to protect our communities. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 177, I'll call up S.J. Res. 11 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the joint resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 11, Joint Resolution providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management relating to protection of marine archaeological resources.
Pursuant to House Resolution 177, the joint resolution is considered read. The joint resolution shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources or their respective designees. The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Huffman, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on S.J. Resolution 11.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise today in support of S.J. Res. 11, a resolution to disapprove the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's misguided protection of marine archaeological resources rule. First, I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Kennedy and Representative Ezell, for championing this effort and collaborating with my team to bring this resolution to the floor today. Additionally, I want to acknowledge Democrat Senators Hickenlooper, Cortez, Masto, and Rosen for supporting this resolution in the Senate. S.J. Res. 11 is a common-sense measure that would repeal a burdensome and unnecessary Biden administration rule forcing offshore energy operators to conduct costly archaeological surveys and submit reports for every exploration and development plan on the outer continental shelf. Under the rule in question, operators must comply with this blanket mandate even in areas with no known archaeological risk, adding millions in unnecessary costs and delays despite existing state and federal protections under the National Historic Preservation Act. Eliminating this one-size-fits-all rulemaking will ensure energy production isn't bogged down by duplicative red tape. S.J. Res. 11 uses the Congressional Review Act to nullify a rule which BOEM acknowledges places, quote, 100% of the increased Gulf of Mexico compliance costs for surveys on operators that are small entities. This resolution would end the Biden administration's needless overreach and return the regulatory regime to a targeted, evidence-based approach. Notably, this repeal preserves America's ability to tap its offshore resources efficiently. It will not weaken genuine historic preservation, but will stop a pointless cash grab that inflates administrative burdens. In fact, this resolution could boost federal revenues by speeding up leasing and production timelines, critical to U.S. energy security. Offshore oil and gas from the Outer Continental Shelf accounts for 15% of U.S. production, supporting jobs, powering homes, fueling transportation, paying for conservation, and lowering costs for goods we all need. Yet this rule, part of a broader pattern of Biden-era restrictions, threatens that stability with added cost of more than 500 additional labor hours per year across operators. Federal regulators shouldn't stifle energy development. This resolution offers a rational fix by eliminating a rule which was intended to add burdens to a vital industry. SJ Res 11 will protect American energy security and keep energy costs down for families as part of an all-of-the-above energy strategy. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're just 2 months in to this Congress, and yet we have already seen one favor after another to big oil from our friends across the aisle. They just can't get enough, and so we are back here once again giving another favor to big oil, and one gets the feeling that they're just warming up, that this is going to be a recurring theme in this Congress. Meanwhile, we are 1 week away from a government shutdown. We are on the heels of what we know is a Republican plan to gut Medicaid to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. But today, are they talking about any of those things? No. They have brought us here to talk about repealing a minor rule that simply protects marine archaeological resources. And if that sounds ridiculous to you, it's because it is. This bill targets a rule from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which is the agency that regulates offshore energy development in federal waters. The rule says that underwater surveys that these companies already conduct before they drill simply have to meet some basic consistent standards. Wow, the heavy hand of government. Republicans have argued that this is simply too burdensome for their friends in big oil. And yet the rule doesn't even require companies to conduct any new surveys. Companies already do these surveys. The rule simply states that future surveys need to adhere to minimum standards to be used for archaeological reports. And no matter how you slice it, this rule will not cause a substantial financial burden to operators. It just ensures that the data companies collect can be used to look for things like shipwrecks and other historically important objects. The chairman said in his opening remarks that he doesn't like the fact that they need to look for these things in areas where they are not known to exist. Well, that's kind of the whole point. If you haven't looked for them, if you're not going to look for them while you're already there doing a survey, we may never know that things actually exist in some areas. Without these surveys, operators might not discover these archaeological resources until they go to drill. And here's what happens when they find them at that point. It forces costly delays for their friends in the oil industry. Because regardless of whether you do this survey work beforehand, companies still have to comply with laws that protect shipwrecks and mitigate impacts to sites that were once above water and home to indigenous peoples. The rule actually promotes efficiency, something Republicans say that they care a lot about. It prevents delays and extra costs for good actors who report unexpected finds as they're required to do under the law, and it keeps bad actors from just quietly working and hoping no one notices, something that's much easier to get away with if you're not required to do those studies in the first place. So why do Republicans want to roll this rule back? Well, for one, my guess is Republicans saw that it was a Biden regulation on offshore oil and gas. If Biden did it, it must be bad. They want to pick a fight with anything that they perceive to be a threat to big oil, even a minor rule that actually helps the industry avoid unexpected cost. But the second reason, very likely reason that we are here, is that they're looking for ways to kill time. They need some pretext to chew up some floor time here in the Congress to distract the public. This resolution does that, and it allows Republicans to keep working behind the scenes on their plan to find tax giveaways for their billionaire friends, working behind the scenes on their plan that we know is coming to cut Medicaid and SNAP deeply, hurting working families all over this country. They voted on the framework for that last week. They're still squabbling with the Senate over the details and what comes next. But clearly, we're not doing work this week to fund the government or to stop Trump's new tax on energy. He calls it a tariff. Or standing up to self-dealing billionaires who are taking a sledgehammer to our federal government, or dealing with their illegal firing of workers and constituents of many of us, and causing complete chaos across the country. No, instead of holding this administration accountable for all of that, House Republicans are urgently tinkering, trying to create the appearance that they're busy doing something here in the Congress on a minor rule that simply requires scientific standards for underwater surveys. They don't want people to remember that they voted just last week to set in motion devastating cuts to Medicaid and SNAP, or that a few days ago Elon Musk said that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and yet the other night my Republican friends stood and applauded for him like he was Elvis Presley. Or that the Trump administration has announced plans to cut staffing at the Social Security Administration in half, in fact, guaranteeing that services for seniors will suffer. Or that the Trump Secretary of Agriculture just went on television and told Americans who are struggling with food prices to get a chicken. That's why House Republicans want to talk about something else. That's why we are here to debate and vote on this rule. I oppose this farcical resolution and the theater that it represents, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this bill is not about repealing anything that's going to add any protections or viability to anything that's happening on offshore exploration. And it's not even, the rule was not even about wearing a suspender with a belt. This rule is put in place to hamper offshore energy production. Under the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106, protections already exist for offshore operators and require them to identify and avoid marine archaeological sites, making this rule totally redundant. But the purpose of the Biden-era rule wasn't just for redundancy. It was to put shackles on offshore energy production and to put higher costs on American consumers who are already struggling with inflation that has resulted from the policies of the previous administration. Good governance doesn't have redundancy and duplicative rules in place that hamper Americans from building and producing. And what we're doing is releasing the shackles off of energy production so that we can provide the things that our country and our economy needs. And that's why I really appreciate the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Ezell, for bringing this bill forward. And I yield to him 4 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in favor of S.J. Res. 11, a Congressional Review Act to reverse the Bureau of Ocean Energy's management BOEM rule that targeted oil and gas production in our outer continental shelf. The Biden administration spent the last 4 years steamrolling our American energy sector with burdensome regulations. Instead of unleashing our nation's vast resources, they handcuffed U.S. oil and gas production with red tape, driving up costs, stifling innovation, and making us more dependent on foreign energy. BOEM's rule is not about safety or environmental stewardship. It's not about protecting archaeological resources. This rule is nothing more than as short of a universal mandate, if even applied to areas known to have no archaeological risk. This is about forcing an extreme agenda that weakens our energy independence and hurts hardworking Americans. The result? Higher costs at the pump, fewer jobs in the energy sector, and a direct hit to our economy. That's why today I'm proud to stand up for the American workers and consumers by leading the House version of this CRA to reverse this detrimental rule. Under the Trump administration, we have the power to push back against these reckless policies and restore common sense energy solutions to put America first. In just last 2 months, we have seen what happens when government gets out of the way Energy prices drop, jobs flourish, and we become a net energy exporter. That's the kind of future we should be fighting for, not where Washington bureaucrats make it harder for American business to succeed. Let's send a clear message. We stand for affordable energy, good paying jobs, and an America that leads, not one that follows bad policies and straight into higher cost and economic decline. I thank Senators Kennedy and Hyde-Smith for their leadership in the Senate, and I thank Chairman Westerman for advocating to get this on the floor. I urge my colleagues to support S.J. Res. 11, and I look forward to the President signing this into law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, my colleagues across the aisle are arguing that the rule is duplicative and the offshore drilling industry is already doing these surveys. That's kind of the point, folks. The fact that these surveys are already being done is exactly why this rule is so simple and not burdensome. The rule does not require any new or standalone surveys for the vast majority of leases. It simply makes sure that these surveys are done right. These surveys that are already being performed so that we can protect archaeological sites by identifying them before the work starts. This is common sense, a tweak that will provide important protection for offshore archaeological resources, bring the agency into compliance with the law, and actually promote efficiency. And with that, I would like to yield as much time as she may consume to the gentlelady from Maryland, Representative Elfreth.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member Huffman. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to S.J. Res. 11. As been said, historic artifacts serve as evidence of ancient civilizations. They teach us about the development of science and trade, transportation, and culture. So many of these artifacts are buried on the seafloor, from shipwrecks and storms to indigenous artifacts. And when that seabed is disturbed, these priceless pieces of history get damaged or destroyed, and more importantly, cost the companies seeking to do this work more money when they disturb these artifacts and are faced with fines and cleanup. Like the Micah shipwreck, which was bisected by a pipeline in 2001, it cost ExxonMobil $250,000 in fees to mitigate the damage it caused that could have been found from the beginning had there been a consistent survey. Again, saving that company money. This is not new. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management has had guidelines on marine archaeology since 1982, and since have been updated during administrations from both parties to create greater consistency and predictability for everyone involved. These rules have stood for 40 years because they protect artifacts and protect the oil and gas companies from the liability of unknowingly destroying irreplaceable pieces of history. Each update to the rules have served to codify industry practice, use the best available science, and ensure compliance with the National Historic Preservation Act. Each update has provided oil and gas companies with more clarity and consistency. S.J. Res. 11 seeks not only to undo all of that work that has been done, but it will prohibit such a rule from ever being enacted in the future. And counter to some arguments, this rule is not financially burdensome. BOEM reports that the total annualized financial impact for the entire oil industry is less than $400,000 a year. For an industry with a reported pre-tax profit of $83.9 billion in 2024, this is a negligible impact. The rule does not negatively impact America's energy dominance and independence. The U.S. is still the #1 producer of oil and gas in the world and has been since 2009. We are producing more oil than any country ever. In fact, we are exporting energy, which is what is really hurting American energy prices. This rule didn't even meet the threshold to require a statement of energy effects report because it has such a negligible possibility of impacting energy supply, distribution, or use. This rule actually promotes efficiency. As been stated, it provides consistency to businesses and protects oil and gas companies from that liability. Doing these surveys before drilling saves time and money in the long run. It is much more damaging to a company's bottom line to stop operations suddenly when they find a shipwreck or artifacts. Nobody gets everything they want in the public policy that we debate on this floor, but this final rule at the beginning of the day is good policy that benefits every stakeholder involved, and banning this rule would set a dangerous precedent for solutions-oriented policymaking. It would roll back decades of bipartisan work that we have all done to preserve history. I urge my colleagues to consider the cost of this action, and I urge my colleagues to vote no on SJ Res 11, and I yield back. Thank you.
Reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves, and the gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, our country is at a point where we need more energy in every form of energy. When we look at the demands for data processing, when we look at transportation demands, when we look at demands for energy to grow our economy and to produce more things here, there's no question. I don't think anybody on either side of the aisle would question the fact that we need more energy, and our energy consumption is on an exponential increase. This rule that the Biden administration made is not about an all-of-the-above energy approach. It's not about producing more energy, more clean, reliable energy that comes from America. It's about attacking an industry. And if you don't believe that, just look at the rule itself. You know, we produce more than one kind of energy offshore. We produce oil and gas. We also produce wind. But magically, wind farms don't trigger an archaeological review, I guess, because they're not included in this analysis, that this redundant process that the Biden administration put in place. The reason they're not is the same reason that oil and gas should not be included, because there's already a process to do the Historical Preservation Act Section 106 requirements when you're getting a permit. This rule was added by the Biden administration just to create another level of bureaucracy, another level of regulatory hurdles to stop offshore oil and gas exploration and production. That's the only purpose they could have put this rule in place for. Otherwise, they would have said if they really cared about archaeological features and artifacts in the Gulf and offshore, they would have included the wind farms in this. But it's only targeted at oil and gas. Mr. Speaker, I'll yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Minnesota, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Energy and Minerals on the Natural Resources Committee, Mr. Stauber.
The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of SJ Res 11, which nullifies the Biden administration's politically driven rule to mandate all offshore oil and gas exploration and development projects complete costly and burdensome archaeological surveys and reports. Over the past 4 years, the American people have seen the most anti-oil, anti-gas, anti-traditional energy, and anti-mining administration in this nation's history. When for energy here in the United States and around the world is growing, as the chairman just said, rather than supporting an all-of-the-above energy strategy, Mr. Chair, the Biden administration sought to stop traditional forms of energy like oil and gas. Prior to the Biden administration's rule, oil and gas companies were only required to complete these reports when BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, had a reason to believe an archaeological resource may be present. Instead, the Biden administration made what archaeological report mandatory, even when it was clearly unnecessary. These unnecessary reports would lead to millions of dollars in additional compliance costs to complete the required survey work and deal with the additional red tape. This is in addition to the significant staff time reviewing these reports would eat up at BOEM, leading to further delays in important energy projects that we need to build for the American people. It's clear the Biden administration's rule wasn't actually necessary. It was just another example of their, quote, death by 1,000 paper cuts, end quote, their agenda to crush our domestic oil and gas industry and raise energy prices for all Americans in the process. After we pass this resolution today, and it will pass the House, and it already passed the Senate, and President Trump will sign it, so after it passes this House today, And when it's overturned, these oil and gas projects won't be waived from historic preservation rules. This resolution does nothing to weaken the National Historic Preservation Act. These developers will still be required to take necessary steps to ensure they do not harm historic properties or archaeological sites. As was the case before the Biden rule, BOEM will still have the authority to require operators to perform these additional surveys and reports when it is actually necessary and actually warranted, Mr. Chair. This resolution will just return us to the previous process. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will argue this is necessary to preserve historic and archaeological sites on the outer continental shelf. If that is the case, why did the Biden administration's rule only apply to oil and gas operations? Why didn't this rule apply to offshore wind development? This was politically driven. I'm not arguing we need these additional necessary requirements for offshore wind. I'm just pointing out the blatant hypocrisy of the past administration. It's clear where their intentions were. Overturning this rule is good for our energy security and for our energy independence. Mr. Chair, a couple nights ago, the President of the United States addressed this House and the Senate. Talked about energy independence, energy dominance, critical mineral dominance, and a critical mineral powerhouse for our nation. It is crystal clear that the Biden administration wants to diminish the true, tried, respective, traditional energies we had and have, because they didn't include wind in this. Complete hypocrisy. If you are going to do it for one, you do it for all. They tried to choose winners and losers. They tried to do it. But here in the House, we're going to follow the Senate's bipartisan passing of the CRA. Today, it's going to pass in a bipartisan fashion in the House, and very soon, the President of the United States will sign this into law. It will change one of the many disasters of the prior administration. The prior administration, as I said, as I opened up, the most anti-oil, gas, and mining administration in the history of this country. I come from a state, rich mining state, biggest untapped copper nickel find in the world. Biden administration banned mining in northeastern Minnesota, took the mineral leases away that were in place since 1966. Yet, they want us to compete in defense, NASA, other areas of our communities with adversarial governments, when we have to buy their minerals for the F-35s, the F-22s, the F-16s, our submarines. Mr. Chair, I am excited to vote on this CRA, because it gives me one more opportunity once again to change the direction of this country that the previous administration was derelict in doing. I'm very happy to stand here today with my Democrat and Republican colleagues in a bipartisan fashion to get this across the finish line. The American people deserve it. The cost of energy and the need for our energy is going to be increasingly, as the chairman just said, Mr. Chair, we need to win the AI war. And that's going to mean we need energy to do it. We're going to need energy, Mr. Chair, when these businesses come back to our country. We reshore these manufacturing facilities. We're going to need this energy, Mr. Chair, to do that. Now we have an administration that understands it and will not be politically driven by just a few people. Mr. Chair, with my comments, I do want to say one last thing. energy independence, and critical mineral dominance is a Trump administration agenda. That's the American First agenda. That's going to employ a lot of people. And I yield back.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves, and the gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's talk about this claim of a double standard, of hypocrisy. Oh, the poor fossil fuel industry is being singled out. Poor big oil with its record profits and its record exports and its executive bonuses and its collusion with OPEC to gouge American consumers. They're just such a victim in the telling of my friends across the aisle. I hate to intrude on that narrative with a little bit of truth, but the fact is the offshore wind industry already does this stuff. They have to comply with the National Historic Preservation Act. The reason that the fossil fuel industry is the subject of this regulation is to bring them into compliance. I guess it reflects the radical proposition that the big oil oligarchs, your pals in the industry, should play by the same rules as everyone else. That is not socialism or wokeness or anything else. It should just be common sense and fairness. But Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about the real human cost of our Republican friends' allergy, opposition, reflexive opposition to any type of regulation, and what this CRA would mean for working men and women on the outer continental shelf. Marine archaeological surveys are not just a nice idea. They actually are safeguards that protect workers from hidden dangers lurking beneath the waves. These surveys can detect unexploded ordnances, UXOs, which are military ammunition that has never detonated, and there's actually a lot of that out there. From World War II into the 1970s, the federal government dumped massive amounts of UXOs into the ocean, including depth charges, torpedoes, munitions, mustard gas, and even chemical weapons, all in designated explosive dumping areas. And if that wasn't bad enough, these same waters were used to dispose of radioactive waste. Now, the old technology used to map these areas was crude at best, leaving countless unexploded devices scattered beyond known dumping areas. But modern marine archaeological surveys can identify these things and save lives before disaster strikes. Rather than protect workers from these deadly hazards, Republicans want to repeal this common sense rule, rolling the dice with human life in the name of corporate profits. They wrap it all up in a phony pitch about prices, like they are standing up for the little guy while they look the other way when their oil oligarch pals collude with OPEC to gouge American consumers. Well, what about the working class men and women who power our offshore energy industry? What about their safety? Are they just collateral damage for the latest favor to big oil? Let's be clear. This resolution isn't about helping the common worker. It's about Republicans making good on their promise to deliver for big oil billionaires destroying our planet. With that, I reserve.
The gentleman from California reserves, and the gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time. I'm prepared to close and continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
All right, thank you. My Republican colleagues decided that the best use of our time today is to debate whether or not we should keep a common sense rule that protects tribal resources, worker safety, and our nation's history. They claim we must do this because this rule is too burdensome for oil and gas companies and will create higher energy prices for American consumers. All of that is nonsense. So what this rule actually requires of companies like Shell, BP, ExxonMobil, companies that make between $28 and $85 billion a year, it requires them to tweak surveys that oil and gas companies are already doing so that they can proactively look for marine archaeological resources or unexploded ordnances, discoveries that would actually stop oil and gas development if they didn't do this proactively, even without this rule. This is a common sense, look before you drill provision that benefits the American people and keeps offshore workers safe. Republicans aren't delivering for you, everyday Americans. If they were, they would take a stand on ridiculous tariffs that Trump is imposing on our closest allies, or unconstrained exports of liquefied natural gas that are driving up energy prices, or repealing energy tax credits in the IRA. All policies on their side that are going to raise your energy prices. If they were delivering for you, they wouldn't allow working class people to go out into the outer continental shelf without the guarantee that they're working on top of unexploded military ammunition or radioactive waste. That's what this rule does. It protects workers and the public interest. They would not allow massive firings of essential employees who protect your public lands. They would not vote for your health care to be ripped away like they just did last week. The Republican agenda in the House today accomplishes one thing and one thing only: selling out the American people and our planet so they can continue to enrich the oil baron oligarchs and billionaire class. This resolution is just the latest favor to these elites, and I strongly urge my colleagues to oppose it. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman from California yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, again, in closing, I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of SJ Resolution 11. And I want to thank my colleagues across the aisle for actually making our point on why this regulation that was put in place by the Biden administration is totally unnecessary. We made the point that it's targeted specifically for oil and gas and that wind is exempted. They tried to say that wind is exempted because they're already doing the analysis under the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106. Well, guess what? Oil and gas is doing the same thing. They're already making these archaeological assessments under existing rules. This is redundant, but it's not just redundant, it's punitive. It was a rule put in place to attack what our colleagues like to refer to as the big oil boogeyman. Apparently because they've been successful and they can actually turn a profit because there's a demand for their product, they should be attacked by the federal government. They should have more regulations put on them. We should do anything we can to stop producing more energy offshore if you're in the mindset of the previous administration. That's not helping America. That's not helping the American consumers. That's not helping the American economy. And it's certainly not helping America on the world stage. It is ridiculous that we're having to come here and do congressional review acts on horrible policies that were put in place by the previous administration. But thank goodness we have the tool to do that. Thank goodness the Senate's already done it, and we have bipartisan support in the Senate to do the CRA on this rule. States and federal laws, as have already been mentioned, provide robust oversight for marine historic resources, again, making this added layer of federal bureaucracy pointless and wasteful. The repeal will lower energy costs for American families, strengthen U.S. energy independence, and support an industry critical to our economy and our security, all while maintaining responsible stewardship of historic resources. And one thing that BOEM failed to analyze that often gets overlooked, it's not just big oil in the Outer Continental Shelf. It's also small producers, family-owned businesses, and a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people, who make a living working in the Outer Continental Shelf. This burdensome regulation will be detrimental to those small businesses. I urge my colleagues to support the resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the previous question is ordered on the joint resolution. The question is on the third reading of the joint resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Third reading.
Joint resolution providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management relating to protection of marine archaeological resources.
The question is on the passage of the joint resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose, gentlemen from California, seek recognition?
Request the ayes and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those in favor of a vote for the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, this is a 15-minute vote. Passage of the Senate Joint Resolution 11 will be followed by a 5-minute votes on the adoption of House Resolution 189. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 218, the nays are...
We're back up.
Mr. Min? Votes no.
Wait a minute, you got another one in the well.
Mr. Arrington? Votes aye.
On this vote,
Mr. Barr? Votes aye. Ms. Presley? Votes no. Ms. Moore of Wisconsin? Votes no.
on this vote, the yeas are 221, the nays are 201, one voting present. The joint resolution is passed. Without objection, the reconsider laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20, the unfinished business is to vote on the adoption of House Resolution 189, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 189, resolution censuring Representative Al Green of Texas.
The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 224, the nays are 198, with 2 answering present. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The House will come to order. The House will come to order. Shh. Will Representative Green present himself to the well? By its adoption of House Resolution 189, the House has resolved that Representative Al Green be censured, that Representative Al Green forthwith present himself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker. The House had come to order. The House had come to order. What's it? The House had come to order. Clear the well, please. Clear the well. The House has to continue its business. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess subject to the call of the chair.